right, back again with the Deep Weeb podcast. This time, a little bit of a long one on that last episode. So I'm going to try to make this a two-part where we have kind of the before, where I kind of already set up the chaos of everything that had been going on before, right up until around the end of 2023, and then moving into 2024, where basically things start to kind of normalize for me and my wife, who had been working through this process of fixing up this abandoned house. So I guess just again, quick recap. So it was abandoned because old guy who owned it had died, and his wife, girlfriend, then ran away with a landscaper and was never to be heard from again. Didn't pay the bank. Bank took it back. And that just happened to all happen at the right time where I could actually find it, even though it's a property that would normally be way outside of anything that I could afford. I figured I could probably fix it up myself. However, there were some downsides to it, such as there was a mold disclaimer we had to sign before we went into it. We found a lot of mold. There was the electricity had supposedly been turned off. In reality, it was actually squirrels had chewed through a lot of the wires in the basement. And then the water for it had been shut off, so that caused a lot of issues with plumbing and whatnot. So that was the expectations were we could just move in, turn on electricity and water, and then remove some moldy ceilings and walls, whatever we needed to, and then be done with it at that point. That turned out to not be the case, because in the reality, there were serious plumbing issues, serious leak issues, serious electrical issues, past rodent sins littered all throughout the ceiling in between the first and the second floor, and then just some serious grading issues that ended up causing havoc with water around the house and whatnot. So that's kind of the context of what we covered in the last one. Now from here, basically my wife and I had just gotten back from a vacation. Things were starting to go back to normal for us. We didn't have to do any like serious house renovations or anything like that because it was winter. It was cold. We didn't really want to go out and do a bunch of stuff like that. So this is just kind of the scenery of what's going on in the area. Like our neighbors put up all these lights. It's really pretty. Start to get some cozy vibes. So suddenly what had been like a really chaotic situation is starting to become a little bit more bearable, I guess you could say. I'm back to playing Arc the Lad on my CRT, starting to dive into the manga club that we built in the Discord, Deep Weeb Lounge. You can check that out. We've now expanded it past manga, and now there's a bunch of other stuff that we're doing in there, otaku stuff. And I started my little Gundam arc, started getting into Gundam. This is, again, just kind of like the scenery of the place. In the winter, there's just like a ton of Canadian geese that just come out here at any time. A bunch of mist and whatever that rolls over the top of it. Looks really beautiful. However, it's not all fun and games still at the Deep Weeb Palace. We had the stove that was basically heating the upstairs area decided to start leaking because once that ice slowly started to melt, it started to seep down it. So it just started dripping all over that. Another one of those things that didn't expect this area to leak. I'd already had my roofer like look at everything around it. Seemed like it was fine, but just given how ice works and that it can kind of like dam up and then like actually go back up, defying gravity at times, it managed to get up inside of this area. So I got to go up here on an icy rooftop and kind of diagnose that. It was fixed soon enough, just due to, again, I got a roofing guy that I called on quite often with this place, gave him a lot of business. And basically, there were just certain areas here that he had sealed up before, but that probably just needed another layer of tarring around them. The reality is all these boots and things that should be underneath the shingle, that would have been the right way to install these pipes, but he didn't install that. So that's just kind of the reality of it. So going up in the winter, figuring out like why, like if there are other threats potentially that are going to start leaking, like this sort of area where you just have debris that this is like a really poor place to even put this like structurally, because there's water coming down on both sides of this, a lot of water, a lot of debris, and it's just going to get like clogged up here. So that ends up just being a maintenance item. There's not a whole bunch you can really do about that. However, I didn't have any problems with that one in particular yet, but we went ahead, cleaned up everything around it, like all this waste around it, and then just basically had another round of tar like applied to it. And that should last as long as it does. And then once I find another leak, we'll have to go back up there and do it again. So, and then this was actually inside the attic, another fun attic adventure. Always hate having to go up into the attic, but there was all of this stuff just basically making icicles inside of the attic because it was managing to drip down around it. That would then drip down that massive pipe there, which is the exhaust for the stove. Okay. I know nobody loves looking at dead animals, but anybody know what this is? I'll give you like 2 seconds in chat to go ahead and type out what your guess for this guy is before I go ahead and reveal what it is. Might look like a mouse at first, but then it has this like sharp nose here. And then it kind of looks like a mole, but then it doesn't have like claws here for digging. So I literally had no clue what this was. I didn't even know that these lived in Illinois, but it apparently just crawled through this tiny little crack. And apparently they're known to do this in the winter. Like they usually don't come into people's houses, but once it gets cold outside, they might come in looking for bugs and whatnot. That is a shrew. So didn't know shrews were in Illinois. Anyways, got a VN shirt from my wife. More animal visitors. This is just like the constant state of things. Speaking of animal visitors, I guess bugs count. Anyways, I mentioned I'm trying to get rid of brown recluses in this place, and one of the ways to do that, besides just spraying a bunch of pesticides, is to just kill off all the other animals that are getting in that they could eat. And the bugs that are coming in here are, I mean, there's just tons of them. Like I just lined that up on a wall, and then after a couple days, like it just fills up with bugs. And that was after I kind of replaced a lot of the parts of the siding. So I was quite surprised that this much stuff was still coming in. At this point, pretty much my theory is that these doors are just like not sealed very well because we still haven't gotten to being able to actually fix those doors. So a bunch of bugs coming in, a couple of brown recluses in here every now and then, but mostly it's just like other bugs and you got to kill off their food source. Also found out that my humidifier that is hooked up to the furnace looked like this whole time that I've been breathing it in. So that wasn't particularly pleasant. Now, given that I already mentioned that there was mold like throughout the house and all of that, and given that there was already one furnace filter that I didn't know that needed to be replaced and was black, I showed that in the last episode, then we have this here, which is just like, looks like it's growing like, I don't know, some sort of underwater I don't know, algae or something on top of it, coral. And I've been breathing this in this whole time. I'll just say I never experienced, I had worse allergies in Chicago than I did down here. So despite what would probably be, you would expect to be relatively poor air quality, just because I'm able to open up doors and windows regularly, I'm not running my furnace a whole bunch because I got this little like gas fireplace, that sort of thing, like keeping the upstairs warm usually. I just haven't, there haven't really been any side effects or consequences of the mold. So that's obviously a really big concern when you move into a house and it's got just like, it's just been abandoned. There's dust everywhere. There's mold everywhere. It's in the ceiling. You have rodent feces all over that you have to just keep cleaning up. And then you got stuff like this that you find like literally a year later. And it's like, man, I should have checked that a while ago. And you just been breathing it in and there's just no side effects. So that's pretty good. Pretty happy with that. I thought this might have been a brown recluse. It wasn't. That's just a normal spider. Every once in a while, on these nature walks, you'll go out and find something interesting. I assume there was an owl in there. I think I later have a better picture of that. But again, this deck, it attracts all sorts of critters at all times. And I'm literally just always sitting in here, like either working from home or, reading some VNs or some manga or something, and get all sorts of critters visiting me. Mentioned I got a Razer keyboard, that it was awful. Replaced that with a Keychron one. At this point, like I said, people on the Discord probably recognize like this is what was going on in my life at that time when I kind of started kicking off like the manga club and that sort of stuff. Then it turned out like we hadn't been using the downstairs bathroom. Like we'd just been fixing it up, and this basically had been completely open to the ceiling. And I for whatever reason, I didn't really put this together that this needed to be like replaced and sealed so that it could actually be used as a functional shower. So basically, this downstairs bathroom didn't get any use for like another year. Finally, my wife has moved down into that and uses this one as her main, but yeah, it took a while. This was like probably early beginning of this year, like the bedroom arrangement. I didn't actually have any pictures of it, but before this, we were actually living upstairs in that main like lobby area because the downstairs was just so gross, like with construction, with mold, all that sort of stuff. So we eventually did move this downstairs. Now, kind of the one weird thing here, at least one weird thing, is there is this white double-sided carpet tape that I put all around that. And that was, again, just to make sure that brown recluses don't crawl up onto me in the middle of the night and I don't roll over onto them, scare them so that they bite me, give me necrosis, amputate my limbs and whatnot. So it turns out that was really effective because that's caught 4. So it's like that's one of those scary things that it's like that is kind of disturbing that this worked as well as it did. Now I will say, I think my theory on this has changed just a little bit. That we've moved it from just being like a magic circle around the bed to ward off the evil spirits to just like making little circles with the tape around the bedpost itself. That way, if anything decides to crawl up it, that's the point that they would got instead of having this giant piece of tape with dead bugs on it all the time around your bed. And since we've done that, there have been no brown recluses. So my theory is maybe the brown recluses were just like running across, like trying to go to dark places. That's what they really like. So maybe they weren't trying to be vicious after all. But yeah, still caught 4, which is kind of disturbing. And then, so this is the downstairs hallway now. Like my wife had actually painted it. It's starting to look pretty good at this point. Like just a fresh coat of paint. Again, at this point, I'm begging my wife. I'm like, please don't make us do the carpet too, because like we can live with like some old ancient carpet. It's not that big of a deal. And her perspective on this is, you know, we got all the other smells out, and now we know how bad this carpet smells. So the reality is, when we moved in, like because there were so many other things going on, like the rodent stuff in the ceiling and the just like the construction itself, cutting wood, all that sort of stuff makes a lot of smells on its own. All the mold, like we weren't actually smelling like what the house just naturally smelled like at this point. And so once we got to this point, it's like, oh man, the hall reeks. Like the hall smells really bad. Right behind this door right here, it smells like cat pee and really, really bad. So my wife's like, I don't think I can handle that. I don't want to have your baby here if it's going to be crawling around on carpet. It smells like cat pee. I was like, I tried to push it off as long as I could, but eventually it's just, I had to come with terms that she's right. It's pretty strong. Like on humid days in particular, like it would smell pretty strong in this hallway. So, and then it turns out that it wasn't really just this area. It was also like down here as well at like the base of the steps. I think that was pretty much the majority of it. And then the office room, like what would become my office, which is the master bedroom upstairs, also had some weird smells in it, but they mostly went away unless it was like a really, really hot day. So that was kind of what we were dealing with. Sunken room, still just like, you know, it looks better now that it's painted, but it's just tracking in dirt. We don't have any flooring here. It still needs a bit of a facelift. And then at this point, I'm getting to know some of my neighbors a bit better. And I know the guy who lives, well, so somebody owns this house, but nobody lived in it. And basically, I sent him this, which you can barely make out. At this point, I've killed off at least 6 of the aggressive squirrels that were constantly trying to get into my house. I apparently gave them the signal that this place isn't safe, so they have moved on to my neighbor's house. So, like, and he's not there. So, well, he owns another property in the area. So, basically, nobody's actually there, but he can come and like handle things like this. But yeah, I managed to pawn off my squirrel problems onto somebody else, which I'm a nice enough neighbor to try to tell them like, hey, like you probably ought to fix that before they burn down your house like they were trying to do on mine. We did try to start Undertale, like myself and my wife. Honestly, she doesn't like it, and I'm finding it really boring. So I really just want to get to the point where I can read this book about how they localized it, because I want to understand it, like the book itself first, like the game itself first, and then enjoy the work of like Clyde Mandelin. I think he makes some like really cool stuff with the legend of localization. This guy showed up on the Discord before, so this was Rufus. I was not trying to catch this guy. I was trying to catch a groundhog that has continued to evade me. It continues to make holes around the pool. Yeah, you can look up on the Discord what the fate of him was. And then just again, this is kind of what it looks like when it's all dead. Hasn't started coming back yet. Winter's starting to unthaw finally. Just have all the bricks that we ripped up from over in the other side yard, and now I have to like kind of dig and trench that area out. I still don't know what I'm gonna do with all those bricks. The otaku shelves are in a dire state of needing like just not being unpacked, because at this point we've already been here for like a year still, and things still aren't unpacked. This bird keeps bugging me every day, coming and visiting me. This is probably the last picture before we decide, yeah, we're gonna have to rip out all the carpet. And so that was probably around January. We got all the carpet in here as well. And so it's all connected. So it's just like we're gonna just have to do everything for it. I don't really see any good way to get around that. And so we start pulling up all the carpet, and lo and behold, behind the baseboards, we find more mold. So it's probably good that we did this anyways. I wanted to hold back on doing it, but again, just like a humid environment that hadn't been maintained, getting up to like 100% humidity. Not a great situation for mold. So it ended up being a good thing that we could just like rip those out, start dealing with some of the smells and all that. Then we have just like, and this is just all me and my wife at this point. At this point, I don't really trust other contractors. It's all going to be really expensive to have somebody else do it. So we just start ripping out the carpet. That ended up being really quick. But then there were these tack strips all along the side of this that they aren't actually in this picture because we already ripped them out. But I just take a shovel to them and just start digging them out. And then there'd just be like nails and stuff that had been driven into the concrete that I'd have to like knock out with a hammer, and then go back, fill all those in, because what we're going to put on it is just LVP, which is like a vinyl plank that's cheap and effective, that we could basically put down without having like a perfectly level floor or something like that. So compared to like something like tile, it should be, in theory, a lot easier to actually do. So that was us working on this. Originally, the deal was, I was like, I built the deck. Why don't you figure out the floors, is what I told my wife. I was like, you do it. If you need help with something, just let me know. And in reality, I still probably did like 60-40 of the work, but my wife did a lot of the work on this one. So it was definitely, I'd probably still be working on this if it was just myself, just because there's so much. I think it ended up being 1,200 square feet of flooring that we ended up actually replacing with this. Because there was this area, there was the sunken room, the rooms here on the side here. We didn't do anything in the laundry room because it didn't have anything to begin with. And then the office upstairs also had carpet. We just basically got rid of all the carpet everywhere that it smelled and just tried to knock it all out at once. Again, bedroom, before we actually ripped all this stuff out. And then, so we're trying to figure out where these smells are coming from the cat urine. And we don't have any pets or anything. So this is definitely former owner. And we take off these baseboards. And I did not realize this, that if a cat pees on a baseboard, the baseboard's the thing that's going to smell. It wasn't just the floor. It was also, some of these got ruined. So then we're like, okay, well, we got to replace the ones that have been apparently soaked with cat pee. And at first my wife was like, oh, we'll just put it what is it, a clear coat over it and just try to seal in all the smells and like deal with it that way. She put like 4 coats on some of these things and they were still stinking. So I was like, okay, well, luckily I know how to do carpentry. I've built a deck now. And so I was like, we'll just get some more wood. We'll cut it up and go from there. So then it turns out that new window that came in started leaking. So I was like, oh, geez, like that's not great. This turned out to be a relatively simple fix comparatively. Like, it turned out to be a caulk failure around the outside of the window here, and then just making sure that the drainage, what are they called? The weep holes in the actual window are actually draining properly. This is still like maybe the only spot that every once in a while, like, it'll still just get damp here. And so I think we fixed every other leak that has come into this house at this point. But that one still, I'm not positive how I'm gonna fix it long term. It's a new window. I really don't want to have to rip that thing out and do it again, but we'll see. And it's just not that big of a deal. It's like a drop if you get 6 inches of rain or something. So it's just like not a big deal. Anyways, this is still pouring in like water from the side here. It's becoming an issue. So I decided to have to take apart the step that had been hurriedly put back together to replace the rotten one for the work that the contractor family friend that I had, Carl, who we fell out kind of, where he landed with this, where he just kind of put it in, even though it was leaking from the outside still. I'm like, okay, well, I got to get this out. I just start pulling everything away, making sure I know how to put it all back together again. And you can just see that basically water was just like pouring down the side here and then pooling up down here where it's beneath grade. So while that's all going on, putting my wife to work again, and we pull up all the carpet in the bar room, and there's just this weird square of glue here in this spot. Nowhere else had this. I'm really not sure what it is. It's just, to be quite frank, like, the house was built in the 70s. There's 100% asbestos in places in this house. Like, it was built in the 70s. It's hard to avoid. I have no clue how dangerous this stuff was here. We tried to quarantine it off as much as possible, use proper PPE. If I die from mesothelioma, like, this is probably the picture that did it for me. Tried to, again, take all the cautions I could. I've tried to look into that a bit more. Like, am I just being paranoid? How bad is it? Probably I'm fine because we wore proper protection, but you never know. And that's just it. It's another risk of taking on an old house like this. So anyways, sometimes you'll see just like 19 turtles just lining up to bathe on the shoreline, sunbathe on that shoreline. That's pretty cool. Another cool picture where it's just like the moon's just out, coming out. Pretty cool. Maybe a little haunted, but looks good. And at this point, like, the pool cover has made a 100% recovery. I'm quite happy with that. Still, don't know if there's bodies in it. Don't know what's inside of it. But at least the top of the pool cover, it's looking good. Looking professional. Anyways, like I said, there's like a conservatory thing pretty close by. So our house basically is in walking distance, and we'll just see like cool animals out there all the time. So just, again, compared to where we were at in the city, different experiences. Not necessarily 100% better or something like that, but different. That window's still bugging me. Anyways, 1 ton of vinyl plank material was finally delivered. Each one of these boxes is about 40 pounds, and we decided to do it ourselves. So it is a lot. And then the new door came in as well to put in down in that area where it kept leaking, right? It was a lot of work to take this from upstairs down the stairs to that room with all those boxes. But anyways, that's what we did. So then there's this other nook area that I've already pointed out was originally part of the sunken room piece of it. And then originally this was probably just a wall that when they expanded the house and they tried to rearrange things, maybe to rent it out or something like that, it ended up going, they added a door here. And so this is not concrete like the rest of it, which made things a little bit tricky for some reasons that I'll show in a minute. But like right here, it was just like really floppy. And when you have carpet on it, it's no big deal, right? Like, carpet doesn't matter. Like, carpet can go over anything, whether it's level or not. Once you put like LVP, that's what it's called, luxury vinyl plank. It's not very luxurious. It's very cheap. But once you put the LVP on top of it, if there's any sort of like bend, like right here, this like actually juts down. Like, you can almost see it in the picture, but it's like there's a serious bending going on here. That's no issue for carpet, but if you put LVP on top of it, the joints will break eventually. And so you really want everything to still be as flat as possible. It's not as picky as like tile, where if you put tile on something that's crooked like this, it's going to break in a couple years. So I'm just starting to get handy at this point. I know how to like cut into stuff, rip out little pieces of plywood that I had to replace. I got pallets that the all those planks came in on, so I just start cutting that up, replacing the pieces. Then there's the other step that is down in that sunken room on the other side, and I just start ripping that out too, because I know I'm going to have to replace that. I know that it seemed like there was mold under that as well, and it turned out there was. Just kind of the ongoing theme. And again, if anybody has like any questions or comments on this, it's just me hanging out on the stream again today. So feel free to join in. If any of this is weird or surprising to you, let me know. This was all news to me too. So inside of here, there was like some mold on this side, not like over here or anywhere else, but on this side. So I thought that was really weird. So like, okay, let's pull this thing apart. Let's figure out how we're going to put like planks over the top of it so that we can get like a finished proper step as well. And I just start ripping it apart, and it's got like construction adhesive, so it just doesn't come apart real clean. There's mice feces in here as well, which I guess they had been coming from behind the wall, and then they would get free reign behind this like little carpet area, which is like on the wall, and it was on the wall to cover up like the original construction that was outside, which is like this really jagged rock that had been caulked closed, like around where they added this addition. It's kind of interesting. Like, again, no signs of water actually coming in from this back wall here where like they added the addition. So wasn't too concerning. It just started cleaning it all out, getting it ready to go. At this point, like my wife, again, I told my wife originally she was going to have to be the one to do this. And she was like, yeah, I can probably do this in a week. Everybody says like putting in LVP is pretty darn easy. And I'm like, there's no way this is a week, not with like 1,200 square feet or whatever we have to do with this. And so she told me it was going to be like a week. She'd take her spring break and do it. And meanwhile, I'm like, this is going to be at least a couple of weeks. I didn't expect for it to be 4 months. It ended up being 4 months of constant work. So more turtles. And they like when I come out onto my deck, and this was a new thing. I hadn't lived here in the spring before. So when I come out onto my deck, they see me from there, and then they all scatter, kind of like cockroaches. And just look at all of them. There's so many turtles there. Anyway, I really like the turtles. And then this is still where the squirrels chewed at that. And the bird visited me at another window, just constantly fighting with its own reflection. And then finally, I'm going to work on this. And so the guy who I originally, this is an interesting story. So the guy who I originally had put up, like, replace the siding, replace the window that I had out here on the bay window, replace a piece of the shed. He told me that, I mean, he builds houses for a living. He said he would replace this door for me. And I was like, well, here's the thing. If you just replace the door, it's probably still going to leak from this carpet pad. Well, he's like, well, I'm going to give you a leak-free guarantee, but that means we have to actually rip out the the concrete pad here as well. So I was like, okay. So we have to rip out this concrete. But in order to rip out the concrete, like I said in the last episode, we also have to actually have a pier here that we could put this on to support it. This is no longer a simple job. So the guy quotes me, I'll say how much. He told me $1,800, which for labor and all of this on this complex of a job, it's not that bad. Honestly, that's pretty good. Because just to like replace this door is probably like doors like this are like $1,000. I did not expect that. Like $1,000. I shopped around for them. They're about that. So getting a door in here, and then the labor on top of it is probably like $2,000 just starting. So $1,800 just for the labor. But then when you have to rip out the concrete pad, put it in a new pier, support this, like that's a lot. So I was like, that's a pretty good deal. I was like, can you go lower if I just work with you on it? Like at this point I'm handy, right? I'm building my own deck over there. You see that? That's a nice deck, right? Like I did that. So I was like, what if like him and his partner plus me, like how much could we drive down the cost? And he's like, okay, well, I'll take off $600 if you work on it with me for a day. I was like that's a pretty good deal. Like I'm essentially making $600. So I took a day off work and just worked on this on my off day. And we'll get to it. This ended up being literally of the entire project. This was the most labor intensive day of all days. Meanwhile, the water is actually like rising here for some reason. Didn't really know why, but later on, there's some reasons. Also, we're just getting a bunch of rain. So this was actually my job. This buff dude here is the guy that was working with me on it, on this contract. So he rented a jackhammer. He says, this is your job. And then I have to start using a jackhammer. First time I've ever used one, extremely exhausting. Like they're just so heavy. Like that's the whole point, is they're really heavy. And then you pull the trigger and they just bounce with all of their weight up and down. And so you're just trying to like control it. But at the same time, it's just like this massive thing. So it would have gone really, really quickly had there not been rebar essentially through all of this pad, which isn't really normal for a concrete pad like this, of this size, to have a bunch of rebar. I mean, it wasn't going to break. Like it was a very sturdy pad. Unfortunately, they put it way too high, so I had to rip the entire thing out. So it's just like, why'd you guys do that to us? Whoever the previous owner was who installed that one. Anyway, so getting in the actual door. Trying to just like grade it all away from here, right? That's why we got to level out here, straight edge, all that. It turns out this pillar alone wasn't really actually holding up any weight. It can. It's probably best that it is there. Later on, at one point, actually it was before this, at one point I put, I had talked to somebody about what it would cost to like close in the deck above it. And they were like, you want to add extra weight to this? This whole thing isn't up to code. You got pillars like holding this thing up. They're hanging off the foundation. I wouldn't put more than 15 people on this thing, or else it's going to collapse and kill everybody. So it's like, oh my gosh, like this is not good construction, I guess. What flew in the 70s might not pass today's construction standards, is kind of where we landed with that. But anyways, so I was surprised to see that this pillar really didn't need a whole bunch of weight, but it is reassuring to have a little bit more support up at that top deck so that it's not crashing down onto the sunken room beneath it. Anyway, so we ripped up the concrete. That took forever and got that in there, at which point they asked for some water to start mixing up some concrete. And I find yet another leak. And this was one of the shutoff valves that I had recently installed. So luckily my plumber just came in and did that. All the concrete, I ended up just reusing it. It's a real pain to get rid of concrete, it turns out. So I just ended up using it as riffraff on the edge of this, which it's really good that it's there, because this hill is just like constantly eroding with all the rain that we get. And so just like keeping as much dirt up as you can is really helpful, especially when you got a structure like a deck right next to it, right? So that was the finished product before it's like painted or anything. There were a couple things that I really wish we would have done differently. For instance, like I didn't show it here like in any of the pictures before, but I had to dig and pour my own concrete piers for my deck. And what I learned is you really don't want to put your the like pillar that you're putting into it, your post, directly into the concrete. You want to put like a metal bracket on there to secure it. And that way it's separated, right? Like if you need to replace the wood at some point, you just put it back into the concrete bracket. You don't have this, which is what they did. And they buried it inside of the concrete, which is what they did at my deck too. Like it wasn't the same guys, but whoever originally constructed the deck. A lot of people just do this as a shortcut where they put it into the concrete. And then there's not a good way to get out the post again. You have to like chop it off here, but then you have a weakened structure that you'd put it on, because now you got like rotten wood that's inside of here probably. So it's just like, it's not a great situation. I'm not thrilled that they did it that way, but also it's like 80-20 split. Like it'll probably last as long as I'm here, and that's probably good enough. This day was absolutely exhausting because I helped out with each part of that. But you know what? I did not have to pay an extra $600. I did find out that this is like at the base. It's on a piece of the pressure treated lumber that I used for my deck. They were like, hey, let's just put it on that. They said that's the normal way to do it. However, this is actually one of the things that I'm still a little bit insecure about. Basically, this area here, I'm really concerned that water can still get on the footing and then flow back into that, when usually you would have some sort of like footing, like tray bracket thing. I looked into it at one point. There's some other way to do this so that you're not leaning on like caulk, which caulk fails. So eventually water gets in here. There's a lot of caulk under this. It's going to take a while probably before it fails, but bugs get in here, they chew it away, like that sort of stuff. And so again, that just ends up being a maintenance item. Let's see. I mean, this is basically the finished product over here. I think eventually we did paint this over here, but this was us. If you remember the last video, like this was all just like exposed. This is where I got almost electrocuted by 240 volts. So it's shaping up. This is where the, closet was basically ended up at this point. Still some painting stuff that needs to happen here. But it was shaping up at that point. I found out that my spigot also started leaking, so that's just another thing that I figured at some point I have to fix that one. I actually haven't yet because it also stopped leaking. I'm going to have to replace it at some point. Sometimes, again, just gets swampy. I do have my dock, and that's basically where I hop onto it there, do some fishing out there. It's pretty cool. We start... Okay, so this is where... I got to transition this. So the LVP that we had been working on. So in between my wife and I doing the floors, I took a day off work to, fix that other situation to make it so that back door stopped leaking. And it did. That worked. It's great. I love it. It was expensive. It was a pain in the butt to rip it all out. It was a complex project, but this whole thing is done now. And it feels great that part's actually done. It's one of those things, when I bought the house, I didn't even know this was going to have to be replaced. You know what I mean? There's just like more of these projects that 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and that's just, it's constantly that, constantly. So anyways, I had originally with a little 2-foot level gone around on my concrete floor and said, hey, yeah, this mostly seems level. I think we'll be okay. I start doing more research onto what the project takes, and they mentioned getting at least a 6-foot level to kind of see how level are your floors, because they do need to be level if you don't want constant creaking, or eventually for the little joints that LVP planks fit together into, if you don't want those to snap over time. And so do you want it to be a 25-year floor or a 5-year floor, basically? So I'm like, I would much rather put in the work now, have something long-lasting. I'm not really trying to flip the house for some like quick profit or something. I don't have any aspirations to stay here forever, but it's like, let's try to do it right. So I get a 6-foot level. And basically the whole place is just out of whack level. Like the concrete floor is like, oh, that's why there's carpet here, because you're not going to be able to put something else on it. So this is what became the big time sink of this year. We probably did over 20 plus bags of concrete, like it's called like feather finish, and Henry 547. You get some of that, you mix it up in a bucket, you stir it, you have 10 minutes to work with it, and then you slap it down on the ground, you take a trowel, and you try to even it out, and then I think it's, what's it called, screed it? I think maybe that's the word. I forget what the word is for it in English. I certainly don't know that one in Japanese. And you just take this across it, and you just level it. And as you can tell, like at the beginning, I'm just like really bad at it, and there's just like, it looks like moon craters. Anyways, by the end of this, I become a master because I have to do it over like 1,200 square feet. And you only do it in the spots where there's dips. So I'm going through this for like hours at a time, just like taking this 6-foot level, going across the whole floor, and marking off with pencil like, yeah, this area is down by 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch. I have to fill up at least, I think it was like at least 1/8 of an inch. I would have to actually start filling it in with this like concrete mix stuff. Meanwhile, this area here, like I have to put in a board here so that we can actually get a level step so that we can make a proper transition and treat this like a step here instead of just something that kind of rolled off like whenever they added the addition here. And then for this area here, where actually this nook, it's just one area it's just completely out of whack level. All these pieces of plywood are just all over the place as far as levelness. So this area ends up just being self-leveling concrete. Now, with self-leveling concrete, you end up having to, you have to basically seal off all the corners, because if there's a leak at any one spot, you're gonna get this like little hole that almost looks like an antlion hole where it just like kind of domes in, and then it messes up the rest of the foundation for it. Now, this is again where I took like, we'll see how this pans out. I did take a bit of a shortcut on this one. When you pour self-leveling concrete on top of plywood, you're supposed to put a metal lathe over the top of it so that it doesn't break up over time. I did not do that. So and a lot of people online don't do that. I watched so many YouTube videos on this. So at the end I was like, I think we can probably get away with not having to take more steps on this than we need. And then so out here, it's just like you have 10 minutes to work with this material. And then with the self-leveling stuff, so this stuff with the level is not self-leveling. And then the self-leveling stuff that we'd pour in here is like, you just put it on, you roll it, and that's it. However it is how it's going to dry. That's what you get. But it's self-leveling, so it basically fixes itself. This stuff, again, it just took a lot of work, me going back and forth. My wife is in charge of mixing duty and cleaning up the materials. I'm just shouting orders all the time, like, this batch is too wet, this batch is too dry, we messed this one up, we have to start over. I only have 10 minutes, I need more material. Like, that sort of thing, just like constantly. So that's like nights and weekends for us constantly on this. And then for here, this is what like the finished product was for once we actually removed the board on the other side. So basically all this material like that I had to add was how much it was off level. So there's a significant like dip that basically had to be corrected there. And then this was the bar room. So another massive area where it was like, okay, like this is too much to do by hand. We're going to have to self-level this part. And it's like, there's probably like a couple $100 worth of compound here to actually just pour out this self-leveling stuff. Because this is the self-leveling stuff. It's a little bit darker brown compared to the gray stuff. Extremely stressful to do because if you do mess it up, it's concrete and it has now dried and it is not going to come up easily. And if you don't get this like completely smoothed out, like I didn't here, what you end up having to come back and do is if you want it to get it like smooth and mostly level, is use an angle grinder and just start chipping away at it, just kind of smooth it out little bit by little bit. So spoiler alert, I did have to buy an angle grinder, though that was for other reasons that I didn't expect. So the reason I had to buy an angle grinder is actually, you can see it in this haul. We're still trying to fight against the smell that's in this haul of cat pee. Cat pee is, I have so much respect for it now. It is like the hardest to get rid of substance ever. It has like these crystals in it that once they get into concrete, they're just like impossible to get rid of. And so my wife, she tried to paint with like mold sealing, or no, it wasn't mold sealing, it was odor sealing primer across the concrete floor, and then we could just like put some planks on top of it, call it a day, lock in the smell, be done. The reality is that did not get rid of the smell. She put like 6 layers on top of the cat pee in this corner of this hall, and it still reeks. And so at this point, I'm like, I already learned from the deck project that you don't put the material on top until you're satisfied with how it is at the bottom, right? So I'm like, we're not putting floors on until we figure out how to get rid of the smell. This is the whole reason that we ripped up all of this carpet in the first place and said we had to do it now. So then it turns out if you paint the floor, but then you want to level it, well, none of the concrete material that you can put over the top of it to kind of level it out is going to actually bond to the actual primer. So, which would mean it would just chip really quickly over time. As things heat and cool, they expand and contract, right? So it's just going to unseal under you, and then it's going to sound like you're walking on gravel underneath your planks. Probably not what you want. So I ended up having to buy an angle grinder for that because I was like, hey, all that paint you just painted on, I got to go take it off with an angle grinder. And I had to use an angle grinder because there was no good other way to get it off. I tried using a razor, didn't work very well. So the angle grinder worked really well though. So then we're just like sealing up, trying to get this part ready and prepped. You can see we did a lot more layers over this. It's starting to actually get pretty smooth here. Actually pretty happy with the levelness of how things, like none of it's perfect. None of it's perfect. There's a spot in the closet here that I was like, oh, I probably should do this too. But then it's like, who's walking in the closet? Who cares if it's not level? You know what I mean? Doesn't really matter. But still trying to do it right. This is what it ends up looking like once you put out the leveling stuff. Ended up just having a really big pole with a spiked roller is what it's called. I think there's a picture of it later on where you just she had to apologize to me for something. I don't remember what it was, but I did get a dogeise at her. Don't remember what we were arguing about. Anyways, spiked roller, just ran that across it, smoothed it out, and then that self-leveling stuff ended up being pretty good, especially for that area. Hopefully it doesn't crack too much over time. I did find these gigantic Canadian geese just perching up on my deck, pooping on it, and then eventually I got too close and scared them away. Anyways, so angle grinded off the top of it, kind of smoothed out the side with the feather finish stuff that I had. Started building up a step over here as well, because this one had the same deal where there was like a plank in the front of it, and I had to just keep pouring more and more of this not self-leveling for this part, but manually leveled stuff. It was a pain to get this stuff like manually leveled, but I couldn't use self-leveling because it would just run everywhere if I just put self-leveling over here. Even against this wall, there was just parts where it fell back between the concrete and it left a not as good finish. So there's just a lot of live and learn things here with construction that I hadn't really dealt with before. And you can see I had basically gone around all the corners here to get up all the spots where we had painted it, and then had to put down more, just basically had to smooth out stuff like concrete that I'd either poured on too much, get off paint, or places where I was going to have to pour more of that feather finish stuff. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of work, like multiple bags, like multiple days. My wife absolutely hated this part of the process. And again, she was under the expectation that this was going to be an easy job that she could probably do herself in about a week, 4 months. But at this point, yeah, I mean, you can see it's pretty much, we got it leveled out. I'm still trying to fight with a groundhog. I still haven't caught this guy. Like, there's a new hole that he made under this, and I tried to coerce him kindly into this cage. He's not falling for it. He just moved the logs around and moved on to a new hole, filled it back in, but he continues to evade us. Anyways, so this was, I don't know if this was a good decision or not. This is still one of those things in hindsight. Really have no clue. But we put down, so this is supposed to be like a moisture barrier as well, because again, we talked about how hydrostatic pressure, or just in general, concrete is porous. You might get liquid that comes up through it. And in general, when you're in the basement, you put between your flooring and something like the concrete, you'd put a moisture barrier in between it. So we put this stuff down, and it was supposed to be, it was a little bit more expensive, but I was like, whatever. Like, it says it's supposed to have sound dampening properties, which would make the floors more quiet. The reality is, this stuff sounds like bubble wrap, and I'm pretty sure I emailed, like, the manufacturer of this is the same person that made the actual planks itself. It's a big reputable brand. And I'm extremely disappointed with this because we spent so much time leveling this out. So the floor should be very quiet, but when you walk on the blue stuff, it's noisy. So we more or less started to correct it. Like, we managed to get it flattened out so it doesn't make a bunch of noise, but these floors are anything but quiet. And so it just ended up being a sacrifice, like, for it. It's like, it's not going to be perfect. Whatever. We'll live with it. And then we started started in this bar room because it had to connect to the hall. So this was a good place that you can work it on one side, and you always work in one direction, working it backwards. Keep a little bit of space at the end because these things do expand and contract with the seasons. So if you put them too close, that's what these little spacers are ensuring. If you put them too close to a wall, they might just pop up over time and basically damage your floors and make big popping noises when you step on them, and then they fall down to the ground, right? Meanwhile, we had already cleared this out once, and now it's like, oh yeah, we still have to maintain our yard. It's already going back to nature pretty quick. So my wife and I made a deal that is like, every weekend we'll just plan on having 1 hour outside, and that's basically how we maintain it, right? Between the two of us, we can basically keep nature at bay. It kind of looks pretty close to this at all times, just because as soon as you actually clear out one area, like over here, it'll start growing back in this other area, That's just constant state of things. She's constantly like trimming back this bamboo, which is extremely invasive. I'm really surprised I have bamboo at my house. It's the middle of Illinois, not exactly where I would expect like pandas to start living or something like that. But that's just the situation we're in. It hasn't been too bad. I actually like the bamboo. It's just you have to trim it back quite regularly. But I'm not really much of a landscaper anyway, so I just like let it kind of grow super wild like this. My wife tells me when I have to mow it, and she says it hurts when she walks through. I tell her she's a big baby, and she says, well, I'm going to just go mow it myself then. And I say, no, I'll go do it, honey. It's not that big of a deal. Anyways, then I found another leak. This was from the plumber that had installed the toilet here. So it's like, so basically at this point, we're not even on the original issues. We're like second generation of issues, right? These are the things that I've paid people to do that are now failing. And so tiny little leak coming out the side. Luckily, I caught it because I'm super paranoid at this point. And I'm like, I call up my plumber and I'm like, hey, can you come fix this? He's like, oh, of course. Gets out there, fixes it. I think that's the end of the issue. And then that actually developed into a bit more at a later point. But we have just like constant debris and stuff falling down from this dead tree. Luckily, nothing's punctured. This salvaged pool cover that I have. There's like one thing that I put a little patch on, but it's still in pretty good shape. This is what the yard starting to come along in spring, starting to grow up a little bit. Constant maintenance, and then we basically at this point get that hull finished. And now it's like, all right, like I think we're doing DIY at this point. It's like we got a before and we got an after. It's actually starting to look pretty good. What was it? Oh yeah, the smell. We did end up getting rid of the smell, and the way was it was actually inside of the wall a bit, and so we had to paint the wall a bit as well, seal that up. We had to remove the baseboards that were there that were stinking, and then basically the smell went away. The hall doesn't stink anymore. The smells in the house now at this point are like a million times better. Like I will quiz random people who haven't been to my house, be like, what's this place smell like to you? They're like, it just smells like a normal house. Nothing really weird. They could be, just holding back saying, KanjiEater and Miss Katakana, you all stink. But I'm starting to think my house doesn't stink. That's basically what I'd like to say there. There's just like little trim pieces that I'd have to like cut out and do all sorts of like things here, things on the side, stair transitions, all sorts of things that were a lot of different things that I didn't really expect to do. Just there's like you think 90% of the work is like the planks or something like that, and then you have to put out all of this stuff, and then you send this to the manufacturer and say, why does this make so much noise when I walk on it? So there's just like a bunch of little things with any project in the DIY space, I guess, is kind of where I'm going with that. It's always 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Nothing's ever as fast or as quick as it goes. This is what it looks like when it's raining. We'll get into some more like rain pictures here in a minute. More physical manga collection. So I mentioned that I thought they fixed the toilet above. Apparently, when they put the other piece of the toilet up on the upper part, I just start like this is a couple days later. I just start hearing dripping down when I'm working on the planks down in the basement, and basically the toilet water had started to leak through the ceiling, had started to mold, and I didn't even catch it until for who knows how long, until I'm just down there and I just hear dripping. And so I go up in here because I now have an access panel where there used to be a hole in the ceiling in the bar roof. Take out my access panel. That was a great idea. Have my access panel. I'm just like, oh man, we got mold up here again. You can see it's, well, you probably can't see because of all this around it, but we had at least gotten most of the squirrel stuff up, but now we gotta, redo some mold fix stuff on that, and then get the plumber out here to actually fix this again. Meanwhile, I'm still just like working on steps and stuff. And again, this is all stuff that still was continuing until early this year. So getting into this step, trying to figure out how do I even build a step? Putting some new plywood across the top of that, reusing what I can. Meanwhile, also fixing this toilet still, going up here, figuring out like how bad is it? Like just trying to reach up with my phone to see how far back it goes. Am I gonna have to rip out the tile above in the bathroom because it ruined that too? I really don't have any clue at this point. Turned out, basically, they just had to fix how the toilet was seated. And here it is. So basically, when the guy came out to fix it the last time, there's this hairline crack here. And this flange, which is the thing that, seats it into the actual pipe itself, there's usually wax coating around this that keeps it watertight, right? He had put 2 wax things around this, which was just too much wax, is what the other guy, he had a partner, and he said, yeah, I took a picture of this and made fun of him. He put way too much wax on it, and then he over-tightened it, and that's basically how we ended up with that. So anyways, they fixed it. I've checked in on it a couple times, and it hasn't leaked since. This is me finally fixing this groundhog hole that came back. I'd already fixed this once. He came back to the same spot. Meanwhile, outside of this, I'm trying to also still get heating and cooling inside of that extra area here. So I've got people coming out to sell me like one of those Japanese mini split things. For reasons that will soon be revealed, this deal did not go through. For kind of scary reasons that probably will affect me this week, quite honestly. So then I say, I'm tired of these leaks. I'm tired of these dang leaks in this dang house. And I invest in smart leak sensors. I don't know why I didn't know these were a thing before. I will 100% get these in any of my future houses. They are battery powered and they only last about 2 years. So that is a maintenance thing there. But I have it in my calendar one day to change out 36 batteries. I think I bought 17 of these. And I have them all over my house now. I have 17 of them because that's all the places that have leaked. There have been about 17 places that this house has leaked. And each one of them, I've put it in anywhere where I think there could be a potential future leak as well. And basically they have these little prongs on the bottom of it that even if like I hold it in my hand and there's like sweat on my hand, it'll like sound it off. And then I get an alert on my phone, so even if I'm out, I find out about it. Now, it's a really good thing that I invested in these because like that same week, right after I had closed up this step here, I found out that this area over here does in fact leak. And it leaks because, I mean, we probably can't see it from over here, but behind what this lady is showing me, there's bad grading and the water would just build up and then it would come over the side. I thought it was coming from the roof the year previous, but it actually had been coming from this side over here where the grading is just too high. Then I found another leak inside of that closet, which I actually talked about this in the last video. This is the spot that basically just had to like caulk around and fill in a piece that had not been installed correctly in the first place, impossible to get to, and you just kind of caulk it off at the top of the deck. It's not a great permanent solution, but that's what it is. So anyways, I got a like lightning storm coming in, and I'm like, this thing is filling up with water over here. I've already trenched this out like pretty deep to like get this back so it wasn't underwater, but it's still just getting more and more water in it. And then that rolls over and goes inside of that sunken room. So this was, I'd say, probably like the third most dangerous thing that I did. Again, first is almost getting electrocuted by the live wire. Second is the pole saw on the roof. And then the third thing is using a metal shovel during a lightning storm to try to get this to not overflow. And so basically at this point, I commit to the next week, and this is like the aftermath of the storm. The next week, every day for 1 hour, I'm just going to go outside and I'm going to dig. And I'm just going to keep digging away at the side of this house until it's low enough that the water does not come in. And this is just some random little bug. I don't know what that guy is still. So every day I'm just out there. There's 2 shovels. My wife isn't helping me though. That's just me doing both. Using 2 shovels at once. That's me. Getting in a lot of audiobook time in this job though, so it made it not too bad. I think I was listening to like Konosuba 3 or something like that. And so anyways, we were supposed to get a mini split put out here, but it needs 3 feet of clearance, and then it has to be in a stationary spot that it's never going to move on a pad, basically. And so I was like, well, I can't really do that because this is on a hill, and I have to dig this out. So that deal fell through. I don't even know that I'm going to put a mini split in here at this point because I don't know that it gets that hot or cold. So at this point, I'm like, maybe I'll just save, I don't remember how much it is, $2,000 to $4,000 or something for a mini split. It's there. Maybe a future owner wants to like install it, or maybe at some point I do. I don't know. We'll see. So Also trying to figure out what the leak was over here in this area, trying to go into like the siding. Like I'm like, maybe it's coming in through the siding because it's down by the bottom of the floor of this closet. Just a little cricket in there. And then this toads. I'm just finding like more and more frogs and toads in this area. And I think this guy was visiting me on a constant basis, but my niece ended up picking him up and he peed all over. So that was fun. A quick frog detour. So when I'm working on the steps down in this sunken room, like one of the nights, it was getting like midnight or something. So it's dark outside. It's really bright inside. And so naturally, like there's just like a bunch of bugs, like really close to the window because they love the light, right? And so the dehumidifier fills up and the bucket there, like I have to actually empty out. So I'm just going to empty it outside real quick. I just want to take a step outside of the sliding glass doors, dump my bucket, come back in. Easier said than done. So I do that, dump out the bucket. Within that time, literally 50 mosquitoes came into the house. That's not an exaggeration. I had to go vacuum them up and just suck them all up. 50 mosquitoes and a frog. A frog literally just jumped into my house and was just jumping around. This place is just like literally just nature nonstop. So I do enjoy that aspect of it. Little moments like that, quite enjoyable. Because I do love animals, even though I've had to kill many at this house. Dark. Anyways, so every day, just keep digging that out. The underwater river, it's gone dry for the most part. So at this point, I'm like, okay, maybe we're making some progress on this house. This was the area that the leak from this year was coming in from. So again, grading issues, I kind of understand. This should have been fixed by Carl when he installed stuff. There was a place where it could just leak down right behind this metal right here, and then that would go all the way down to the floor. So I was like trying to look down at the siding, like where is it coming in down here? But it wasn't. It was coming up all the way at the top. So just kind of really unintuitive, knowing like where the water was actually coming in. Ended up, I haven't had any problems with that, and we've had heavier storms since the one that originally made that one leak. So I think at this point, the place is shaping up. Like here it is. Like this is the outside of it. It no longer has all that like black mold at the front. We're finally getting into like some of the after of what this place really starts to look like. And it's pretty nice. I'm quite happy with it. A lot more maintenance than, I would want to do. But again, if you just kind of time box it 1 hour a weekend with the wife, it's not so bad. And so this was one day where I started like getting more into output, and I was telling all my Hello Talk friends about like all this sort of stuff in Japanese that I'm doing nonstop, using all sorts of like construction terms that they hadn't heard of and stuff. Apparently they don't know the Japanese word for jackhammer, which I was kind of blown away by, quite honestly. That because I don't feel like jackhammer is a weird word in English, but apparently it is in Japanese. Anyways, still a lot more trenching, just like trying to get all the water to move away from this area. But I'm starting to win at this point. Like it feels like I had been losing for about a year to this house. And this is probably the point. This is probably like about April or so, April, May, where it's like, okay, I think the place is finally starting to come together. And so here is like the next project that we started getting into, which was my main office upstairs. We rip up all the carpet in that area, and it turns out that this room probably ended up being the most difficult, quite honestly, which is kind of surprising. But we ripped up all the carpet in it. It didn't smell too bad, but as soon as you got the carpet up, this particle board under it, which is a terrible underlayment for anything but carpet, basically. And even for carpet, if you pour water on it, this is the same thing that like cheap, really cheap Akiya furniture or something like that would be like built out of, right? You get water on it. And it just expands, and then it gets out of level, and you can't really use it for like a proper flooring area, right? So I'm like, my sister and brother-in-law came over to help, and they brought my niece and nephew, and I'm just tell my nephew, like, go around to all these stinky spots, tell me which one of these like we have to like actually fix. And then we ran around to them, and a lot of them still stank. Like there's just like little spots where I don't know if it was, again, a cat that peed on these areas here or what. Then there was like just this one real dark spot from like, there's a tub on the other side of this that at some point, probably before we had the house, had actually, sprung a leak there. anyways, Mrs. K, Kirby cosplay. This is her getting ready to paint something again. This is I told her this is what she needs to go to Comic-Con and later on in December when we go to Japan. Extreme Kirby fan. I mean, even those shoes are pink. But anyways, so she's going down to do like more painting in different rooms and stuff. I'm just working on this nonstop. At this point, this is my office. So I want this. We're not going to use it as a master bedroom. I'm going to have my office in here. It's going to be an awesome lake view. I'm going to get this thing all shaped up. I want to work on this nonstop till I get it, just so I can get like moved in ASAP on this. And so we ripped up all of the particle board on this as well, because I was like, I'm not going to be able to put flooring over it. It stinks. Why don't we just take it off and we can just put it on the plywood underneath? Well, the plywood underneath it is not level. So I was like, okay, well, what we can do now is I could either rip up all of the plywood and then try to shave down the joists that are going laterally across this. It was like, man, that's so much effort, and you have to get like a laser level and that sort of thing. That is the right way to do it. I did not do it that way though. I said, what if we just put more plywood on top, another 3/4 inch, kind of like what we had of the particle board, and it just goes to that, and then we just kind of treat it like we did the other spot, and we just like put like the feather finish concrete stuff on top of it to kind of like level it out, right? A lot of cleaning, a lot of removing stuff, a lot of prepping this to actually put another piece, like I think it was 11 sheets of plywood, which that's like $400, $500 a plywood. Like wood's getting expensive. So ended up being just like an extra cost. Hadn't really planned on, but and each piece of plywood is like 50 plus pounds, and it's just like massive 12. How big is it? Like it's taller than me. So like 8-foot pieces of plywood or something like that. So anyways, rip it all up though, start getting it all ready. Didn't really find any mold in here though, so that's good. So the areas where it was at was areas where there was humidity issues. I mean, no mold besides this one, which that's kind of a given that there was water at some point. Also fighting off carpenter bees as well. Those tend to get into the wood, which isn't so bad. The bad part is when the woodpeckers come and try to eat them out of it, and they just blast giant holes into it. But yeah, so that's how you take care of carpenter bees. So this is the new plywood that we put on top of it. And there's actually a lot going on in this as well. So basically, each one of these holes across this is one of, I think it's 500 different screws that I had to put through this layer of plywood into the next layer. And then some of these actually go down into the joist. And the reason I did all of that, and I put construction adhesive underneath this. So this is just like super solid. And the reason I wanted to do that is because like maybe we can get it so that it's just level with this new layer, because beneath it, it's not. But if I can get this layer of plywood above it completely flat on this, maybe it will even out some of the dips and bends and that sort of thing. Because I don't want to have to do a bunch more concrete, because I hate doing that. My wife hates doing that. We hate it. Unfortunately, you don't really know how level it's going to be until you get it all down. Once it was all down, turns out this is so not level. So it's like all this is going to have like concrete put on top of it in certain areas where it dips and bends and that sort of thing. But it is a really solid level that is like layer that's basically underneath the floors that I'm sitting on top of right now. Also, birds still flying into the window. This little guy right here flew in and knocked himself basically dumb for like 3 hours, and he just like sat there and just completely knocked out. Eventually he did fly away. Either that or something ate him. I don't know. Probably flew away. Meanwhile, like I said, I have seasonal maintenance duties on just like that roof under the deck. So this is what builds up under the roof. And you have to get this off on a somewhat regular basis, like once a year is probably hopefully good enough. Otherwise, water's just going to sit on here, and then it'll eventually rust, and then you'll get back in the square one where squirrels can just eat through the disintegrated part of whatever you have here. So again, at this point, this is basically as clean as I can get it by just like throwing a shop vac down after putting in a couple boards and like trying to peel it back. This is also the work that the guys did where I had them cut this back so that now it can actually breathe against the house. So these boards used to go all the way against this, and then it would rot out the siding. If you can make it so that the siding can just breathe, it's not going to rot as quickly, right? Obviously, all old stuff here that has to be at some point refinished for this deck, but we were testing out basically our power washer here because, as I mentioned, we have a lot of decks, and the 2 new ones that we built now have to be stained, otherwise they will start to rot because you have to seal out the water, because water is the enemy of wood. So this is us just like prepping it. So this is that deck. Like once we went through it and started putting like I bought like a little power washer disc and just gave it a light power washing, put some primer stuff on it to get it all ready. And it's starting to clean up pretty well, right? Like, I mean, that was the deck I built. It's still looking good. You can see there is just like some interesting things that happen over time. Like this just kind of gets out of bow here. Like the wood just starts to naturally warp and bend like wood does. I've got like one here that just starts popping up a bit. So just little things that happen over time with wood exposed out to the elements. But this is basically it getting primed, and then we're getting ready. And at this point, I think we're in June. And it's starting to get really hot, like 100-degree days. And I'm like, but we still have to stain this. So let's start early, try to get through this. Didn't really matter. This ended up being a really hot and miserable day. We should have done this like way earlier in the season, like in April or something. But anyways, prepping all of this, and here's some of those carpenter bee holes. They just poke holes. Like it's kind of hard to see actually here. Like just all along the side here, they just poke holes in the wood everywhere, and then the woodpeckers come in and try to eat it. But it is a beautiful day. This was the day that we actually did decide to stain it, so it was a good day to do it as far as like lighting and all that. But it just starts getting really hot, and this is like the first layer of stain that we put over it, and you can just see it kind of like really brings out like these just start to kind of like glow orange compared to like what they were before. So we got like just like a really natural stain finish, trying to just like show off all the wood grain as much as possible because it's new wood. It should look good. Once it gets a little bit older, that's when you use like darker and darker stains. But trying to just keep it natural. And then this is this deck that I made that was stained. So I think like this is just like really gorgeous in my opinion, just like how gold it is, that sort of thing. So I think it turned out really well there. Meanwhile, we're also putting in like I didn't get a full picture of all the places that we had to pour concrete in this upstairs room here, but this is it. It was a lot. And then I tried to tape all the joints so that if for some reason something does flex over time, again, plywood flexes at a different rate than concrete will. So eventually that will probably crack in different areas. And you don't want little bits of gravel underneath your planks. That's kicking up noise and that sort of thing. However, as soon as like we laid down some of these massive pieces of concrete and I screeded it or whatever the word is to like flatten it out, I started hearing like giant popping noises, and it's just like concrete cracking. So that only happened really at the beginning when it was kind of settling in, but there was like just some hairline cracks that already went through it because there was a lot that we had to pour. Just this room was probably like 8 bags probably. So a lot of work. But here it is. Like finally, we're kind of. This was like the first room that we completed entirely, and it was because I kind of went like insane mode on it and was like, I'm gonna do the baseboards myself. I'm just gonna like get everything in here, get this all going, and I think it turned out really, really good. And same here. I think like this is into the from the closet into where my office is, where I'm like streaming right this very moment, and it starts to look honestly pretty professional. So super proud of what my wife and I managed to accomplish with that. And so then the next step obviously is put all your junk in it. And so, always looks a little bit messier once you're actually living in it. I still have to do like some serious cable management here. This couch is really only here for 2 reasons. One, to cover up all the cable madness here, but also because sometimes I'll take a little nap here. But it's a nice and cozy setup, quite honestly. And then I just like look out, this is my view. Like literally right now, I can look out the window and see all of this swamp stuff building up right now. So I actually really, I almost hesitate to say it, but I really love this house at this point. Because yeah, it's just a really nice private setup. When you have like comfy vibes like this, you get to play your GBA Swordcraft Sorcery Summon Knight on your CRT. It's pretty good. And then the brown recluses visit again. So this is a definite brown recluse. This guy was crawling around the office like as soon as I moved in, basically. And then the floods come again. So this is after I had already trenched out this area. Like I said, I dedicated like 1 hour for an entire week and just dug this out. It actually managed to hold off everything just fine. And I was like, okay, I'm doing it. Like I'm DIYing here, guys. Like I'm managing to find these problems. You know, my engineer brain goes to work. I just do a bunch of research on it online, watch a crap ton of YouTube on it, and then just, you know, put it into action. A little bit of sweat and labor, forcing my wife to do a bunch of the work, and it turns out pretty good. You know, it's certainly not a pretty sight, but the trenches are moving water away pretty well. So this is where, like, normally there would just be a giant puddle right here across next to the house, filling up the underwater river inside of that sunken room. But I did manage to see that this this is flowing away pretty good. But then I'm like, okay, I actually have to trench this out too. So that was a project for another weekend. I did do that. It seems to have gotten better in this area. Then I started being like, oh wait, this is in the bar room. It's like, oh, is there water coming in here? Like, nope, that was already there. I later on realized that's always been there. I don't know what the staining there is. Maybe that's a future problem at some point, but I actually don't think it's a major issue now. More brown recluses. I think this one was in the garage, which it's not surprising when they're in the garage. It's worse than when they're in the house. That's a big juicy one. That's probably a future mama. They're still in full swing, unfortunately. Again, since it's getting colder, I don't see them around as much. Quick transition. Did take a quick trip to Chicago in the middle of this. Found a really cool arcade that opened. Thought that this was awesome. 2-player versus ping pong. After we went to this giant arcade, my wife and I got some food. And this was her afterwards, like licking her fingers and stuff after the arcade. I told her I was going to put this in here to shame her for it. After you go to an arcade, don't lick your fingers. That's really gross. That's how the Chinese spread COVID in the first place. So back to our main message here. So we get back from Chicago. We're finishing up the rest of this. This is basically the completed bar. This is probably the cleanest picture of the bar I got at this point. It looks like a livable space, right? Like I think this all turned out pretty good. There's no holes from the squirrels. All the lights actually work. You have the little access panel if there is some future leak. Like this is where it had been leaking, and we got that fixed as well. I put up like transitions across all of this down here, transitions across all of this. We got all the baseboards installed again. It was a ton of work, but it actually looks pretty good now, right? I don't know. You guys tell me how you think it looks. So then again, I already mentioned that I kind of tested that there was no hydrostatic pressure. That was one of my biggest concerns, is this place going to flood? I got my leak sensor over here. It's not a big deal. This was me testing it manually. This is what it ended up looking like. So I was like, that's fine. Also, more brown recluses in the laundry room, because that's where they love to be, apparently. Right where your clothes are at, which isn't that a comforting thought? And then this is what I ended up doing with all of the vent covers, the vents in that sunken room, where I mentioned that, you know, I had put concrete over the top of it. I smoothed it out. I put another layer over the top of it. Now it's basically just flat. You know, I try not to walk directly on it, because if you just stomped on this really hard, you could break it up eventually. But just a couple layers, cleaned it up. And now finally the sunken room is also starting to shape up, right? We got that door in there. I ended up doing these steps as well myself. These steps, for whatever reason, doing steps with vinyl plank, it is painful. It takes a lot of time, but I managed to get it, and I think it looks really great. Same deal over here. Started to experiment with like what the transition is between this step. Turned out looking pretty great there. And then also any of these vents, I did put like tape over it just to make sure that any water that might be starting to build up under it, like it's gonna have a hard time trying to get out of any of these spaces. It should stay under the ground as long as it possibly can. So at this point, we're finally like, hey, like let's actually start enjoying the lake. Got this $350 off of Facebook Marketplace. I did not expect kayaks to be that expensive, but getting 2 for that much is actually a really good deal. The guy who came out and greeted me from the trailer park where we got it from had like his Glock like in pinned behind his shirt, tucked into his back of his jeans. Ended up being a really nice guy, and I definitely didn't want to mess with him seeing that. But yeah, I mean, that's what happens, I guess, when you're doing business with strangers online. This area actually did. So here I am thinking we finished all of the leaks, and then I finish up this step here. The door at that spot just isn't leaking anymore. And then I get this. And honestly, it kind of started to make me panic because I was like, I just sealed all of this up. Like, I don't know what could possibly still be letting in water here. We just redid the entire door. How could this possibly be? Also, the irony that over here on the side, my wife had moved the leak sensor from where I originally had it, which was right here because I knew there was potential to leak here. And it obviously didn't go off, so I didn't find it right away. This happened because we had 6 inches of rain in 12 hours. That's a lot of rain. That's like millions of gallons of water in this area. So basically what had happened was outside, there was a downspout with an L that it connected to. And when the water just started like pouring and gushing down it, I hadn't screwed in the L part of that downspout. So it just came out. And then the water is just pounding down on the actual footing itself. So as soon, like I literally peeked out my head outside, saw it and said, oh, that's it. I go put it back on, it stops leaking. So later on, actually screwed in all the downspouts, made sure they had proper screws in them to make sure nothing moved around anymore. But it was a really simple fix. So this was yet another leak, but I think this might be the last one. Anyways, so 12 inches of water though, I had dug this out. I was really curious. I was like, oh, nice. It's still beneath the footing here. This seems to be working well. And then the water just keeps coming and it just keeps coming. Also, this was the day that I was supposed to be done with everything. So I ordered a giant new big screen TV. I haven't bought a new TV in like 10 years. So I was like, hey, like, let's get an OLED, like 77-inch thing. Like finally, like try to unwind a bit with all these like DIY projects that I've been doing. And it's just pouring and pouring. And so it does get above the footing. And now I'm like, oh gosh, this is a lot of water. This is like, this might flood the entire basement again. Is kind of what I'm thinking. And so it's just like pooling up all around it. It just entire river at this point. But luckily the trenches are working. They're doing their magic. And then the underwater river also starts getting more water in it. And at this point, I'm pretty sure it was only this much water. Actually, it gets a little bit more water. But it was only a little bit, like in comparison. So I'm pretty sure if I just keep digging outside, eventually I can grade this away so that it just never gets water in this thing here. But at least this storm finally did trigger after a year of nothing, basically down here in this underwater river. And I do have the leak sensor here just ready for it. It did go off. It was this thing that kind of tipped me off that there was an issue there. It was like, I think we'll be okay if we just keep regrading it. Anyways, so those new kayaks I got, I had them down at the base of the lake. And I had to move them up 3 times because the water just kept rising. And at this point, like, the water is usually down here at the base of this. Like, it doesn't even come up to this under normal circumstances. So it just keeps getting higher and higher. And the reason for this actually ended up being because there's a place where the lake drains off to a creek. And it just completely got clogged with all the things moving around and all the water moving through it with like a big log. And so I think there's a picture of my neighbor later on. Like, he ends up going over here to actually clear it out in the middle of the storm so it doesn't just back up and flood everybody's house along this water line here. So that's definitely the craziest like thing that I've seen like the lake do so far. Like, it usually is pretty tame. This is the most water I've ever seen in this after we've like fixed up all the gutter issues, downspout issues, all that. So basically just shop vac that out. I don't have a sump pump or anything. At some point, that might be the proper solution. Water basically was getting right up to this dirt line right here on my garage, but it's basically will never go past this is kind of where I'm at with it. So again, like, I was getting water in the garage at one point from the side, but now that's basically fixed. During all this, I'm still trying to just figure out how to read. I tried reading manga on my giant OLED screen, and it wasn't a very practical use of it. But I did start to get some nice CRT shaders on that. I actually prefer this now over my actual CRT for like 240p old games and 480p stuff. So I'm a pretty big fan of this. This is like the Megatron shader that I'm using through Reshade, and you can use it in other emulators like PCSX2 and that sort of thing, and it turns out really well. PSP games look like really good on it too. So I had an OLED for, I still have it, and I'm looking at it right now, for the my desktop monitor, which is like a 27-inch one. I really hate that one, quite honestly, especially compared to this one, like the LG TVs are just so much better than the LG monitors. Is kind of where I landed with it. This screen just looks so much better. Like the one that I have right now that I'm looking at is like 1440p, whereas that one's 4K. The TV, and the TV's just it just is incredible. Anyways, so things did kind of go back down to normal. Started sinking away. The groundhog visited again. He made a hole behind the pool equipment after I had already dug all this out. So, like, I'd already fixed this all up. And, I mean, I wasn't planning on using it because I still haven't uncovered the pool or anything. But I was just like, man, this jerk. So, I try to bury him again. He pulls it back again. So, eventually, I put a piece of wood right here, put a deck screw through it, called it a day. He hasn't come back to this spot. I'll just go outside, though, and he'll just scurry away as soon as I come outside. We both know each other are living here at this point. He's the most consistent animal that I see on a daily basis. Anyways, did finally finish Arc the Lad. Finally, I'm starting to wrap up most of the DIY projects. Able to unwind a bit more. Arc the Lad, mediocre game, but the second and third one are pretty cool. I played quite a bit of the third one. Okay, so here we go. We are really starting to wrap stuff up now at this point. Only a couple more photos to go through. This is the aftermath of it all. So I believe Simple Surfer in the before video mentioned, hey, this looks like a good room for exercise stuff. So after water got in here, I was like, there's no way I'm putting the planks back into this. No way I'm going to do this. We just won't put anything down here. My wife was like, I asked you about this before and you said no because it wouldn't count as like a finished flooring. But what if we just put exercise tiles down there? I was like, that is such a good idea. I don't know why I said no to that before. I was like, well, because I wanted something like professional down here that we wouldn't have to change out again. But it's like, you know what? At this point, yeah, let's do that. Let's take the shortcut. And so that's exactly what we did. We ordered it was like $1 a square foot, and we just bought a bunch of these exercise tiles. They were some cheap Chinese made thing, and basically they sent us 2 different colors at one point, and my wife got really frustrated that she had to redo a giant section of it because they sent us the wrong color basically from their own stock. The closet now actually kind of looks and functions as a actual closet. Ended up all looking pretty good. Step looks good. Really happy with how all the steps and everything turned out. Again, originally we were just going to plank this entire area. It's just so much work though compared to throwing down some of these squishy tiles and calling it a day. We were planning on making the bar room kind of into an exercise area, but this is a better use of that space anyway, so that's what we ended up going with. And I think it looks really good. And yeah, again, just painted the little trap door, redid all the wiring or the gas line so it's not in the way, all the wiring with the fuse box. This is my replacement to that giant tent that I had down on the deck below. I just locked that in here. This is good protection against the mosquitoes. This is usually where I'm doing hour-long hello talk conversations, or at this point I'm just calling my Japanese friends. I don't even really use hello talk, but I just call them, talk to them out here on the deck in the morning when nobody else is out. And it's a really peaceful time, quite honestly. I haven't talked about this, but this is how I get rid of the squirrels. We'll leave it at that. Anyways, then the next thing was I just started moving on to fixing up my dock. And when I was working on the dock, this guy was in the duckweed, which I still don't know what this thing is really. It has this giant bubble that it floats around on it, this spider, but it was pretty cool. So I pulled it out. It's pretty big. And this is finally, again, this is, I think, the first most realistic picture of so far you've seen of what it actually looks like now, kind of where we're at. And this is where my wife and I hang out. Every morning we work out here together. Good vibe. And this is now the setup upstairs, where I play stream some Yuzu from my actual gaming PC using Moonlight, so that I can play Switch games in 4K, watch some Kuroro Gunso. I wish I used this more than I actually do. I'm not really playing through any games right now. I'm basically just watching anime on the CRT and on this TV. But it's a pretty comfy setup. So I'm pretty happy with how that turned out. Again, we already talked about I got diatomaceous earth everywhere, to keep things out. Still, just innumerable projects that I could work on, but things are actually coming along. Played through Tales of Destiny this year, which I was thrilled to finally play. This game is the reason why I learned Japanese. So playing through that with that CRT shader on the OLED. Just looked incredibly good. The animations, 2D art style on it was so good. Wrote a really lengthy review on it. And then this is still how I'm just kind of like constantly maintaining like what's coming through my roof. This is just a natural thing that I have to do anytime it storms really bad. 4 deer in the front yard. Again, this is just kind of like normal, everyday stuff here at the lake. This was like one of the last projects. This is like what I was working on, I guess, here in October. Finally getting that out. And then it turned out when I was working on that, I found out, remember, there were only 2 things that worked when I moved into this house. One of them being the garage door, which my wife hit, so we had to have it replaced. And the second being my dishwasher, which was tiled into this, nearly impossible to get out. I literally thought I was going to have to cut it out with a saw until my wife and I put on grippy shoes and just yanked at the thing till it came out because it was leaking underneath. I was like, hey, maybe I can fix it. I'm handy now. I can just like put a new valve under it for the thing that had started to leak. I try that, but then it starts leaking in other places. And I'm like, you know what? This came with the house. It wasn't that good. So we're going to have to order a new one of those. So finished Tales of Destiny. Beautiful. Got my new dishwasher in. It works great. Super happy with it. We've started to explore kind of outside of this where we have a, what's it called? A Frisbee golf park. So we've started going and doing that on our weekends. It started to go back to like life as normal, I guess is what I would say. And all right, just like a couple last quick detours as I'm wrapping up, and then I'll have some true final after pictures. I did get, anybody on the Discord knows this, I got this fancy new phone this year too. I was like, my current phone is like from 2017. I was like, whatever, I'm upgrading everything else. Like, let's just go for it. And I was like, man, this thing is awesome. Like the Google Pixel Fold 2, like so great. The big screen on it, the portability of it. I haven't had a new phone in 7 years. I can stream games to it too, and it works pretty well. Also, Groundhog visiting me. It looks like it might have cut out. Anyways, what happened with that was within the first week, it broke. So that went back. I'm back on my 2017 phone. Maybe there's a picture of it later in the roll that got mixed up. But yeah, that was the quick detour on that one. Anyways, this guy comes up. He visits me. I got to trap him at some point. He makes holes all over. Did not know that groundhogs could climb steps. I have seen him leap off of this in fright from me, but he's a pain in the butt. Anyways, fuzzy spiders. I walked through that web 3 times with my face in trying to work on this. And this is, I'll probably save this for some future video at some point, but ripped that out. Actually started, just kind of doing a lot more of the construction around this place myself. This last one here, it kind of, I was going to show like just kind of how the cleaning process works at some point. I don't have a video to show on that, but this one really just demonstrates how green the lake can get, where it's just like a complete green carpet. And it's just kind of wild, like what a swamp it can become. But then that changes on an hourly basis. Like today's like halfway like green carpet. It's not as good as what it was a week ago when I filmed that. And then a week before that, it was completely green, like I showed in that picture. So this is just, again, this is like normal leaf stuff that is just constantly building up on here, just constant maintenance, always like this. And then this is kind of makes you dizzy, but that was all across that. That's what the current state of it is. There's just constantly leaves everywhere. Had to rip out that piece, got the new piece in there. Groundhog came back another day. And more gigantic logs. Like at this point, you guys have seen this, right? It's like, this is just the constant state of KanjiEater's house. Put this up crooked, had to fix it. Started the anime club thing that we've got going on now. My wife and I started playing HeroScape, and now the bar room has been converted into a HeroScape room. All of a sudden, my wife started cooking apple pies. Life is getting really good. A lot more of a positive note than we really started on here with the before stuff in a squirrel-infested house. It's starting to actually become cozy. This is yesterday. So yesterday, it rained for the last 2 days. And look, there's no water inside of the underwater tunnel, so we seem to be winning. There's a lot of condensation in this general area, so that does alert me. But that was all from yesterday. I finally got that all trim, cut, put in there right, painted. weatherproofed it. Should be good to go. Better than it was. It's not perfect by any means, but this place is just constant 80-20 split. Obviously, still a lot of yard stuff that needs to be happened. Still haven't uncovered the dead bodies in the pool. Let's just kind of fixed up the dock a little bit, keep our stuff out there. And then this is the current state. This is like us living in it. You know, it's not as fancy as like a true before and after where like nothing's in it. But the reality is we had to live here through all of this. So it's just kind of expanded and grown. So this is the very simple home theater setup. Got our little couches there. Got our little food here. Tables for eating, and then, you know, the gas fireplace for keeping it warm in the winter. Kitchen, you know, all the appliances, everything just seems to work. There's more or less it's a functional home at this point, and that was really the goal of where to get it, like, you know, a year ago. But then it took a year and a half or so to get to this point where everything just works. I got my little anime figurine set up. Look down on me as we speak. Got the nice lake view like I've shown off before. And this is just the entranceway. Still pretty stunning, just like coming into this, and you have all of this just open space. It's still kind of an awkward setup, just like to have like a TV in here, but then you have this like stove in the middle. So like this is like the best we can kind of imagine of what we would do with it. The laundry room still is like, it hasn't been painted. There's still some things that just kind of need to happen as far as that. Maybe fill in a couple of the gaps around the like some of the drywall that had to be taken out to like fish wire through to get all the electricity back in after the squirrels had eaten through it. But yeah, my wife doesn't have any shelves, so she just keeps it all on the floor. Then we got the new sink that we put in. I still have this giant $500 fan that I need to figure out how to sell or do something with, because I'm never going to do anything with it again, because I'm not doing any more mold remediation. And then I have a bunch of guitars that now I need to sell, because those have been with me forever and I'm not playing them. And so this is now just like a storage room in the bonus room. Like I said, my wife finally is actually using the closet. And like I mentioned, all of this stuff, I'm going to be having this in an Imager album at the end, so you can get a clear like before and after without having to sit through, what are we at? Like 5.5 hours of streaming today. So bare essentials for you know, keeping a woman looking beautiful down here. This again, if you remember, this was like all moldy before. There was like it looked like there was water running down it or something, like had stains down it. The ceiling here like stank from squirrel. It's basically normal. And now we have not an actual bar, not a coffee bar. My wife wanted like a coffee bar. I think my mother was the one insisting on a coffee bar down here or something like that. Now this is just a little where we play HeroScape, little miniatures game. That's been our last 2 Friday nights. Just living cozy life down in the bar room. And yep, we got a free treadmill from some relatives. Stored away the extra plank that we didn't end up using here, and that we didn't want to return from it from the gigantic plank job that we had done. And that's pretty much it. This is the result of a lot of work. I think it turned out really good. We're really happy with it at this point. That's not to say that there aren't things that we wouldn't like. There's still like a lot of major projects left with this place, right? The biggest ones still being that we have a pool that we haven't uncovered. We have like the deck steps that need to be completely redone because you can just like fall through those. It is worth calling out here. Like this used to have the hole for the return in it. And you know, all that ceiling had to be replaced, and that all ended up looking really good. I'm really happy with that area too. But that's just going to be the constant state at this place. There's always going to be new projects. There's at least 3 decks that still need to be refinished and redone. But at this point, I kind of know how to do it all. So it's like, and if I don't know how, I can go figure it out. And that's kind of the nice thing about having an engineering mindset, is you see problems and you can just learn to go fix them all yourself. So what's next from here? I'll just go ahead and start wrapping things up. The next big thing for Kanji Eater is I'm going back to Japan. It'll only be a little 3-week vacation, but I'm going back, and I will be probably doing a stream with a lot of people that people know from this channel, like Doth, Hamslice, Darius. Who else we got coming? My wife is actually going to be probably in the first Deep Weeb live stream that she's ever been on. Now that you guys have kind of seen who she is through some of this, all the hard work that she helped me out on with all of this through all this like really stressful, trying time. So I think that will be a really good one. We also have a couple people just from the lounge. So if you're in the Tokyo area and you've actually talked to me before, like you very well might show up in the next Deep Weeb podcast that we might do live together. Might have to like rent a space for it or something like that. So I'm looking forward to that. Also just going to be going around Tokyo, meeting up with people that I met online, Japanese friends, and going to Hokkaido. So that will be the first time that we go out there. Want to do the Seiki Junrei, the holy pilgrimage of Golden Kamui, and go through, just see all the things from that. If you don't know what Golden Kamui is, it is the peak otaku anime manga, and best one's the manga, so check that out. But anyways, so from here, I will give some more closing thoughts. So obviously, I'm looking forward to, again, getting out of the house and doing some stuff in Japan. Would we do it again? I think that's probably the question that we get from a lot of people quite regularly, is like, you went through all of this over the last year and a half. It obviously, you bit off more than you could chew. I'll just summarize what I'm still worried about, and that'll probably answer this for you. So first off, everything that we do continues to feel like 2 steps forward and 1 step back. Anytime I get into a project, there's always something else that's going wrong. That's just normal DIY stuff. You just got to learn to deal with that. I'm more or less okay with that. The always leaking that I found, I have at least 17, I think, leaks that I've documented of things that have happened. That has gotten really old really quickly. I'm quite exhausted with all of the leaks that have happened. I would say I would probably, like, that's something that continues to really bug me. Like, anytime that happens, it's like, oh man, I got to go figure out how to go fix this. But at the same time, around the 17th one, it's like, you're kind of used to it. You know what I mean? So it's like, kind of just used to that. That's just the way this house works. And so the leak sensors definitely give me some peace of mind that even if I'm away, I can find out. I can probably have like a relative come over and help out at that time or something like that, right? If I'm like not around or something. The other major thing, like this is the thing that actually majorly bugs me, is that the entire sewage for this probably it's connected to cast iron, and I don't know how long that cast iron is going to last. So it's like, how long can you actually stay in this house until I have to jackhammer up all of the floors or do something else? I don't know. And then the sewer line itself has like roots growing into it with all the trees into the clay tile pipe that is around it. So I also don't know how long that's going to take until it backs up and makes a gigantic sewer mess. So those are things that I can't really control. I don't know how long they will last. It's not a pleasant thing to always have that kind of anxiety lurking over you, especially like with the rain situation. Like every time it rains, I get a little bit anxious now. And I never had that problem before at any other house. At this point, like I said, the place is leak free. Like we did it. Like it's a success. But the journey to get here was quite exhausting, as you can imagine. Also, just knowing that this house was built in the 70s and that there's probably asbestos through any of the things that I've like chopped out, it's not a great feeling knowing that, oh, I probably exposed myself to a bunch of like dangerous stuff. My house that I had before this in Chicago was built in the 50s. I didn't really have a bunch of concerns, so it's definitely a mental thing. Like it's not like that's affecting me, but it's one of those things. The deeper I got into DIY, doing research on safety and like mold remediation, all that sort of stuff, you just kind of you don't have the same blissful ignorance, I will say, which again helps you get through some of the challenging engineering challenges that show up in this. But at the same time, it just gets kind of exhausting after a while. The squirrel electrical damage is still kind of a concern. I think we got everything out. I think there's not really any problem left with that. I don't think there's going to be some fire that happens in my house from the squirrels that had chewed through a wire. But I might have just not found the wire that is going to eventually kill me and potentially my future children. So, all in, would I do it again? No, like definitely not. Like this was nuts. Like I did not expect it to go quite like this. I definitely didn't think it would take this long to get to the state where it's at. I didn't expect it to be this expensive. That being said, like, do I regret it? No, I would also say no to that. Like, I didn't know the things that I didn't know, and I can't really hold that against my past self. I've obviously gotten a lot more experience from this through this journey. Definitely aged me a couple years additionally, but overall, do I regret it? No. So if you are considering taking on like your own giant Akiya challenge, I would say I don't think originally I was thinking this is good skill and I might do this in Japan at some point, like legitimately. I talked about that before on like Ham Slice's server, gotten made fun of it. Oh, you can't do it. You can't do it. Like, I was like, yeah, I think I actually could. And the thing is, I probably could, but it is very helpful to have a network. And so I mentioned a lot of times in here how many times I called on family to like help out with all this stuff. And if you don't have that in Japan, like that would be a real difficult part of trying to build your own Akiya. So or rehabilitate one. So that's kind of my closing thoughts on it. I hope you all enjoyed the journey as much as I did to some degree. I really do quite enjoy this house now. If anything extra interesting happens, it'll probably just be a post or two on the Deep Weeb Lounge. So do go there, hang out with us there. We got the Otaku Club that I've been hanging out with this whole year. I think from here there should be less DIY projects, which in theory means more time for KanjiEater to do future otaku greatness. So I'm really excited about what the future is from here. Like literally, I was showing stuff up until the last couple of weeks or so. I probably have a couple things I gotta wrap up this week. Probably do some more digging. But in general, that's kind of where the house is at, and I appreciate everybody who actually stuck around to hear out all of this stuff. Obviously, it's been a long journey, but thank you very much. And I will see you guys probably live streaming from Tokyo next time I talk to you. So look forward to that. As always, you can find me everywhere at KanjiEater, mostly just on Discord these days, so hang out with me there. I'll talk to you all there. Have a good one. Thank you.